Point Roundtable podcast. My name is Andy Nowicki, coming to you from Savannah, Georgia. With me, as always, is my partner in thought crime, Colin Liddell, in Tokyo, Japan, and with us both is the Thunder from Down Under, Richard Wolstencroft.
Yes.
Colin and Richard, how are y'all?
I'm very good, very good. I've delayed my lovely day in the country for you gentlemen, so I hope you all appreciate it. To share the thoughts on the wonderful ink election in which the Ulster fascists saved the day.
What do you mean by a day in the country?
A day in the country. Well, actually, my girlfriend and I were going to pop up the country, and we're going to have lunch actually, but now it's midday here, so I think we've missed our lunch appointment at the restaurant we normally go to up there. But I've got a meeting actually with a composer, so I'm popping up there to discuss the soundtrack to a new film, and I'm shooting a new film clip for a band called Crisis Actor, actually, and it's called The Dissonant Reality Show. It's about how we live in a different reality. There's a thing called the Berenstain Bears, or the Berenstain Bears.
Yes, I know all about that. The Mandela effect.
Yes, and also Interview with the Vampire and Interview with a Vampire. I remember.
Yeah, right. I'm all over that, yeah.
Now it's the. So we're all living in a different universe. I don't know how the globalists did it, but let's blame them, you know?
It's a fascinating subject, the Mandela effect, but I don't want to get too far afield. And
Yes.
Because as you indicated, Richard, we are going to be talking about the British-UK election and what the results mean, and we're going to be leaning heavily, or I will be anyway, leaning heavily on Colin being somebody who is, after all, from the island of Britain, where this election took place, even though he now lives in Tokyo, Japan.
Yes.
So, Colin, maybe begin with just a broad
Introduction.
impression or your general thoughts about what happened.
Well, I think we just have to kind of like fill people in on the sort of basic framework of what's going on. And, we had a general election in 2015, just a couple of years ago.
Right.
And
You and I talked about that one, as I recall.
yeah, we probably did, yeah. And anyway, only 2 years later, here we are again having another general election, and so that probably needs a bit of explaining. Now, in the last general election, David Cameron unexpectedly, I think most people would say that, he unexpectedly won that. Most people were expecting Labour to pip him or for the result to be a kind of hung parliament. But unexpectedly, David Cameron had a late surge. I think it was later explained as English voters worried about a Labour SNP coalition, and that kind of prompted a lot of English people to get out of the house and vote. And so anyway, David Cameron got in, but he had quite a narrow majority in Parliament. And then shortly after that, we had the famous Brexit vote, and of course David Cameron expected to. Basically David Cameron called for the Brexit vote because he wanted to fend off UKIP, because UKIP was eating away his support from the right side. And he thought, if I just say, like, okay, we'll have a referendum on EU membership, then that'll shut up the UKIP supporters in my party, and they won't defect to UKIP, and so I'll keep them on board, and that'll ensure my majority. And everything was going according to plan to keep his majority, but then, of course, unexpectedly, again, Brexit happened.
The best laid plans of mice and men, as they say.
Yeah. And so he had to like fall on his sword, and so then they looked for a new leader, and they opted for Theresa May, and that was a bit of a weird one in a way. But I think the reason they went for her was because even though she had backed the Remain campaign, nobody really remembered her doing that, and so she was kind of like a bit of a nondescript in that respect, and so people could view her as a neutral. And so she was kind of like ushered into the portals of power, and she became our prime minister. But by now, that very kind of small majority that David Cameron had won in 2015 had worn even thinner through natural wastage. And so going into these very tough Brexit negotiations, it was starting to look like a kind of unstable situation, because there's always going to be little backbench rebellions. And so bearing that in mind and looking at the opinion polls, which showed an enormous Tory lead, Theresa May decided to go for the election. And then in the weeks leading up to the election, she was basically, her party was like 20 points ahead in the opinion polls. And then just in the last couple of weeks, as we actually neared voting day, the Labour Party, led by Jeremy Corbyn, started to pull up on her. And so it's now created this very remarkable situation where we actually have a hung parliament, and the Conservatives have to rely upon the support of the Democratic Unionist Party, a party that most people have probably never heard of until extremely recently.
I had never heard of them, certainly. I didn't know. I mean, I was sort of glad to hear that people like that still exist in the United Kingdom. I sort of thought that all traces of that kind of person who felt those kinds of that kind of way and talked that kind of way sort of ceased to exist around 1988 or so. I mean, that was just I didn't think people, there were still people that, who were that staunch.
Staunch.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. What are you referring to by their staunchness? What exactly does their staunchness consist of, in your mind?
Well, I mean, I'm just going by what I've read in the last couple of days, because I'm a Yank, obviously, and I don't know that much about British politics, and I'd never heard. I mean, I knew about Northern Ireland and the sort of low-level civil war that was raging. I mean, that's maybe overstating it a little, but I knew there were
really
factions, the Catholics and the fighting against the Protestants and the IRA, and
I thought it was very fortuitous in a weird way. I mean, because I actually studied the DOP, because I'm making this film called The Debt Collector at the moment, and one of the main characters who comes out, he's kind of been in hiding in northern Queensland, but he flies down in the film. There's a character, it's a guy called Jimmy O'Hare, and he's based on the actual real Ulster fascist character, Jimmy O'Dare, who I shared a picture on your page recently as a joke. And I never could have picked that they would hold the balance of power in this situation and essentially enable Theresa May to continue her Conservative reign, and also to, I guess, play an important part in what's going to be now the Brexit negotiation.
It's fascinating. Can you explain to us how this happened, Colin? Because once again, as I was saying before, the best laid plans of mice and men. I mean, Cameron thought that Brexit there's no way it would pass, and that it would just be a way for him to burnish his credentials. But then he was astonished to find that it actually passed. And I was actually in the UK last summer when the reins of power were handed over to Theresa May. So that was an interesting time to be there and see all the ferment that was taking place at the time. But once again, this year, the best laid plans of mice and men, with Theresa May deciding to call another election. And as you say, in a way, you can't really blame her from a political, a tactical standpoint, because it looked like they were in good shape. And then their lead evaporated. First of all, I had two questions. Why did this happen? Why did they lose so much ground so quickly? And second of all, how is it that this seemingly fringe unionist Protestant extremist party now is the kingmaker, and now is the way by which she will hold on to power, apparently?
Well, actually, I wouldn't characterize the DUP as extremist. I'd say that most of their policies are in line what normal people think when they're not being gaslit or kind of browbeaten
right.
to accept in certain.
I was using it kind of in an ironic way. Although I don't think extremism isn't necessarily a bad thing, but
yeah, the main question is, like, why did the Tories, who were going into this election with a 20-point lead, why did they basically fuck it up and end up with turned out to be a 2% lead? I mean, I think a lot of people are still scratching their heads over that one, and there are kind of reasons you can point to, but there's nothing that's really completely satisfying that has an explanation, because I mean, basically Jeremy Corbyn he represents this new kind of Labour Party, which is basically a party turning into a kind of SJW cultural Marxist party, because what's happened with the Labour Party, it used to be a very mainstream party in tone and in presentation and in policy, but because they've changed the voting system, that gives the activist base much more power. Before, the party used to be much more controlled by the elected members, and of course the elected members are much more wary about kind of unpopular policies or pushing the party into an extreme direction. They like to keep everything middle of the road so they can get re-elected and stay on the gravy train. But they changed the electoral system in the Labour Party, and so these kind of activist members who are not actually elected by the public then have the dominant say. And so that's pushed the party towards SJW territory, because those people are kind of highly driven to sort of come out on like wet Tuesday evenings for these party meetings that nobody else would bother with.
I've got a bit of a confession to make on this, and this is probably not the forum to even do it, but I actually supported Jeremy Corbyn in this election, and I know it upset a few people on the alt-right, and I don't know if I fully agree with Colin's interpretation of Corbyn. He, to me, struck me as an old-school leftist. I mean, obviously there's a lot of social justice warrior and cultural Marxist trappings associated with the left today, and he had to give lip service to the usual multicult bullshit and other various things, but to me, he struck me as almost an English Bernie Sanders, who was based...
That's what I was about to say.
Exactly.
I don't know much about anything, but that was my impression as well.
He was banging on about the things that actually made the left, I guess, resonate with people in the past, which is decent healthcare, decent education, the old, economic equity, which to me, that is the main issue of the left. It's not transgender toilets, it's not gay and lesbian rights, it's not multicultural tolerance and the love of foreigners. But this is all stuff that came to the left in the last 25 years. The left never even used to be particularly interested in these things, and even in some elements of the left were opposed to it. So to me, I think what resonated with him, and the thing that made me support Corbyn, was a guy by the name of Nick Cohen, who writes for The Spectator. He's a disgusting globalist cunt who hates Donald Trump, and he began to release these videos hating on Jeremy Corbyn. And it just made a connection that he hates Trump vehemently, but he hated Corbyn just as much. And it made me think, you know what? This could be perfect, because these globalist bastards can't stand Jeremy Corbyn. And, okay, he would be weaker on immigration than the Conservatives, there's no doubt about it. But, he's going to hate Israel, he's going to, think the Palestinians are wonderful, and it's just going to annoy the living shit out of the globalists. And I just thought that itself was so beautiful. And I think, you know what, people hate the globalists. And when I talked about the globalists, 1%, blah, 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 to left-wingers, they fucking love it. They hate this group of people as well. So the alt-right and the left, I think we have actually a mutual hatred of this elite. You know who we're talking about anyway. And
yeah. That's all true. He gets under a lot of people's skin, and in particular, there's a bit of a kind of a Jewish thing as well going on.
Absolutely. I mean, they tried to derail him too. I mean, that was another reason that made me like him, because the Jews basically tried to get rid of the poor bastard, basically for being a real socialist. And I couldn't fucking believe it. And it riled me so much.
Basically, I know that's all well and true, but basically, if you had Jeremy Corbyn in, you'd have a lot more social welfare, you'd have a lot of social housing, and you'd have all these kind of perks. And who would he be lavishing that on? He'd be lavishing that on all the bloody migrants pouring in, because he'd basically take the doors off the hinges, and he'd allow anybody would be able to show up and say, I'm a refugee, and they'd be right in there. And the white working class would be being taxed to death to pay for that. So,
No, I agree with you. I mean, there were certainly caveats, for my support of him, and it wasn't, I didn't write an essay for you guys, you know what I mean, for Alternative Right. To me, it was a tepid support, and in the end, I think the result we got, which is Theresa May victory, somewhat chastened, and also with a kind of, the majority being held by these Ulster loyalists, Ulster fascist people, was an interesting result that even I couldn't have picked.
Yeah, so, we're still trying to deal with why this happened. And now the main point I was making was that Jeremy Corbyn was generally regarded as a kind of unelectable candidate. Like you, I didn't think he was as bad as people were saying he was. I mean, I think in terms of Labour Party leaders, he's probably the best they can hope for at the moment, because most of the other top Labour leaders, they just come across like really, really creepy, and
I agree.
They just there's something.
Was he an improvement over Miliband? Because I remember you were talking about how. Is it Miliband or Miliband?
Yeah, he was, because Jeremy Corbyn, once you scratch under the surface, there's lots of very, very dubious left-wing ideas there. But on the surface, he comes across as a reasonably likable old uncle character. And David, or is it David or Ed? I get them mixed up, those two. Anyway, Ed Miliband, he looked like he'd just been recently exhumed from a shallow grave. And most of the Labour Party top leaders have that kind of same slightly dead atmosphere about them. And so they did very well to get Jeremy Corbyn in there, because he actually seems like a human being. And this is one of the things that played in his favour against Theresa May, because Theresa May, her performance was widely criticised. She was seen as being very robotic, very unnatural, very aloof. She was kind of caked under all this makeup. She was always worried about her hats and her necklaces. And she wasn't actually up for a debate. She actually refused to debate Jeremy Corbyn. She was thinking, I'm going to coast this, so I don't really have to expose myself to the kind of hurly-burly of elections. And that's something that Jeremy Corbyn quite likes. He likes going around and meeting all these people and doing stuff on the stump and campaigning and getting out there. And that's his life, and that's his bread and butter. He's been doing it all his life. And so he came across as a real kind of human being compared to Theresa May.
Theresa May came across like Hillary Clinton. She did. She came across as this kind of aloof elitist who didn't want to debate anything, who just kind of like accepted that she should be elected. I think the only reason that she won was simply because the Conservatives were that far ahead that Corbyn was not able to make up the difference. I just wanted to say that I say to all my left-wing and Marxist friends that the left really has to uncock itself on the issue of immigration. There are many reasons the left could oppose immigration, to support the local working class, to support the local welfare system that's put under strain from too much mass immigration. Obviously there's that famous video online where Bernie Sanders discusses open borders and is not supportive of it, which he calls open borders a Koch brothers idea. So there's a whole left-wing critique of immigration that I think the left really needs to get engaged in. But of course, Corbyn didn't really go there, and I think if he did, that might have pushed him over. And I say this to all my left-wing friends, but they still have yet to cross that Rubicon, because obviously there's that. Of all the beliefs held by the culture Marxist left, the multi-cult and the belief in mass immigration and open borders and refugees, it's almost a matter of religious faith.
Yeah, you say that, but I think the left, deep down in its heart, it kind of knows that most people are actually a little bit conservative by nature, and they don't really believe in all these left-wing ideas. And most people are basically like the DUP. I mean, the DUP, we've kind of uncovered them, and because they've been tucked away in this kind of like isolated political ecosystem in Northern Ireland, which has preserved this example of like normal British people's political party.
Exactly.
And
that's what I thought was so remarkable about them.
And the left know that, and that's why they want to keep going on with the mass immigration, because they know they have to import their voters. They know if they allow society to stabilise, people are just going to start swinging to small c conservatism, and they're not going to be interested in all these left-wing ideas.
And I think you've just spelled out there, Colin, the importance of this election. I think that the BOP balance of power is more than just the fact that they have those 10 votes to the Conservative. It's significant and symbolic of that kind of small conservative local politics, which I think really can grow. And also it's very alt-right in many ways, and I think we all should encourage. So I think you've really pinpointed the whole nexus and also symbolic significance of this election for the alt-right and also for the greater English electorate and community.
Yeah, I think people are going to look at the DUP and they're going to have a sense of nostalgia.
Correct.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that, Australian soap operas were so popular in Britain in the 80s and 90s, was because people looked at that and it kind of reminded them of how Britain was, before the 60s. And I think the DUP kind of will play to the British public in the same way, and they'll think, why can't we be like that again? Why do we all have to have this gay marriage this and gay marriage that, and mass immigration this and mass immigration that, and political correctness everywhere? And that just looks so appealing to people.
I've been flooding everybody's pages on Facebook, even though I'm enjoying a 1-month ban for my big mouth on my main Facebook page. I have a secondary one that I've got operating, but I've been flooding everyone's pages with Ulster posters and pictures of Ian Paisley and pictures of Johnny Adair, and it's just been hilarious. Mm-hmm. And many left-wingers I've been flooding their pages with it, so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I put up a story on Alt-Right News which said DUP in power in UK, white Sharia achieved.
There you go.
Because that's a bit of a meme at the moment, you know what I mean? And
I like that piece. I thought that was funny and clever.
Yeah, the point I'm making, the kind of serious point I'm making is that they're trying to give you two extremes. Like, you've got to be either ISIS or a complete degenerate, and actually there's something right in the middle there, which is quite healthy and which most people would agree with, which is more or less where the DUP stand. I mean, they're not exactly ISIS. They're not throwing gays off buildings. They just don't think that homosexuality should be treated the same way as heterosexuality. I mean, they are opposed to gay marriage. They're opposed to things like abortion and so on. And they don't swallow the whole kind of climate change narrative either.
It's really
I didn't think that people like that even existed in the UK. I didn't think there were religious conservatives, because these are like hardline Protestants, right? That's kind of where they these are like Calvinist types.
In a way, yeah, but I think they're basically normal people, and most British people would think along those lines. And what we've actually got is a political system that keeps alive two dead parties, which are kind of like controlled by very specific vested interests. On the one hand, you have the Labour Party, which is controlled by cultural Marxists, and who have a certain perverted agenda, and they're able to stay in power simply because the electoral system doesn't allow third parties to break through. And then on the other side, you've got the Conservative Party, fake Conservative Party, who are basically just globalist shills who are just trying to serve their masters in the City of London. And both of these parties are essentially hollowed out. I mean, Labour has been so hollowed out that it's now controlled by its kind of like activist weirdo base. Normal people have stopped going to Labour Party meetings years ago. And I mean, some of it started in the 1980s. That's when the party started to transform into this weird creature it is now. And the Tory party is completely hollowed out as well. But these two parties can stay in power because of the voting system penalises any smaller party. Yeah. Unless, like the DUP or the SNP, you have intensely concentrated support in one region.
Yes. And I think that, you pointed out, obviously, a major issue, and this is not just something that's related to the England, but it's the case in Australia with the Labor and Liberal Party in Australia. The two main parties are basically, a larger percentage of them anyway, are controlled by, let's call it the globalist interests and the internationalist cabal, etc., and both sides of politics. And so that's why, I think when you look at who you've got to choose from in elections sometimes, I always look for the one who's the most rebellious. And the only reason that, Corbyn interested me is that he just seemed to be receiving such a slating from what I would consider globalist media. It was almost Trump-esque at times. And,
what do they have against him? What was this one particular columnist that you...
What's real socialism is just as much a threat to these greedy 1% bastards as ethnic nationalism.
Well, no. I think what it is he's been quite supportive of the anti-colonialist struggle in the Middle East, which basically translates as being anti-Israel. And he's supportive of groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and a lot of the people on the Jewish side won't forgive him for that because that cuts across their own ethnic interests, which is also kind of pretty alt-right in a way, you know what I mean?
They got the whole Blairite faction, obviously, who's just a puppet for the Israeli interests and Jewish interests. They basically, had him do his little puppet dance and, basically destabilise Corbyn. I mean, there was a lot of arguments within left-wing. I have a lot of left-wing friends, obviously, because I'm from the film industry. Many of them were arguing about, because he came very close to actually winning. And I think the Blairites, I think, really sabotaged him. And also, there's that guy on YouTube who does these videos where he's meant to be like a reporter. It's an act, but then he does this kind of rant to camera, and often he has a lot of good points. He's a left winger clearly, but and he said there that basically it's the Blairites from within Labor that sabotaged Corbyn, and I saw this happening for the last year and a half, in left-wing Marxist circles, online, and I have a few friends in the UK who are Marxists who remain friendly and seem to tolerate my alt-right views and allow me to comment on their pages. So it's been rather interesting to kind of watch this sabotage, and it was absolutely massive, the destabilisation that these globalist and Jewish interests were trying to cause within.
Well, I think that's a bit conspiracy theory-ish. I think what's going on in the Labour Party is you have a lot of people who think he can't really win a general election because he's too extreme and he represents that kind of very activist, extremist SJW base. And so they're thinking, well, this guy's unelectable because of his positions. We have to get a kind of plausible, moderate centre-left guy that can appeal to Middle England. And so they've been trying to get rid of him for ages. And there's been two leadership elections which he won easily because of the way that the Labour Party is now structured. And then the great thing about this election is he did much better than expected, and I think that's partly because Theresa May did much worse than expected, and that now ensures that Jeremy Corbyn's got a kind of like a real grip on the party, a kind of almost death-like grip on the party, and that's going to push the Labour Party even further to the left because these things, they never stay still, they're never static, and. I think what will happen is the left will still basically eat themselves now, and they'll drive the party into the ground with excessive leftism.
And even though my support of Corbyn was kind of, I guess, tepid at best, probably. And then I fully understand your critique of it. And obviously, someone like Ed Miliband was an attempt to have someone more middle of the road. Obviously, Blair with more middle of the road. And obviously, at the moment, they don't seem to have that candidate.
Well, even Miliband was a swing to the left. But now he looks like almost like a Blairite moderate compared to Corbyn's positions. And so this just shows you that the party is already careering off course in a leftward direction. And okay, they did all right at this election, but that's because a lot of people are just like pissed off with the Tories, who are another dead, hollowed out party.
I mean, this is a question purely from ignorance, but why was UKIP not able to make any kind of dent whatsoever in this election?
Well, the last election in 2015, there was still a lot of bounce behind UKIP because we were still pushing for Brexit, and so that was the issue that kind of energized Brexit voters. And so at the 2015 election, they got 12.5%. That's like 1 in 8, roughly. 12.5% of the people voted for them. They got 1 MP in Parliament. And that's because of the voting system. The way it works is, the whole country is divided into 650 areas, which each elect 1 MP. And so if your party's support is kind of like spread pretty evenly, you'll end up coming second in a lot of places, but you'll never come first. But if your support is kind of like concentrated, like with Labour in the urban areas in the north, then that benefits you, that system. And the Conservatives benefit too because their support's concentrated in the shires and the suburbs and the south. Now the other parties suffer from this too. Like the Liberal Party, they often get sometimes back in the 80s, Liberals were getting up to 20%. Because a lot of people were unhappy with the Labour Party. But they had an enormous mismatch in their vote and their representation, and people kind of know that, and because people know that party is going to really be hammered by the electoral system, they think there's no point voting for it. And so that's what happened with a lot of the UKIP supporters. Now in a lot of the articles and analysis, they're talking about the UKIP vote collapsed, and that's the wrong way to talk about it. The UKIP vote didn't collapse. All that happened was that the supporters of UKIP had to vote tactically because they knew there was no point actually voting directly for the UKIP candidate.
And And I think we should comment on the absence of Nigel Farage in the campaign. Matt Forney wrote an interesting piece that I read last night, and I think that he was someone who was linked, obviously, hugely to Brexit, and he was also someone who Trump supports, and he's also been over in America doing various media things, and I think even working for Trump. So, his absence from this campaign, I thought was interesting in a way. Obviously, he gave his support to a few different people, but he really wasn't a real presence in this election.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually interesting to think what would have happened if Farage had still been leader of UKIP. Now, if that had been the case, he would have probably have bolstered UKIP's support by a couple of points, and but then that might have taken support away from the Conservatives. And then that could have let in Corbyn, but in that case, of course, even if Farage had been the leader and had been fighting a belter of a campaign, that wouldn't actually have enabled UKIP to get any MPs elected, because the system is just so loaded against them. And this is the problem with Britain. It's the problem with America as well, I believe. You need a degree of proportional representation so that these parties that start small can build up their base, and they can actually give their voters some sort of representation in return. And that's what you see in Europe. You get these very quite right wing or quite nationalist parties in Europe making the breakthrough because of the proportional representation system.
We have that in Australia in the Senate. Obviously in the House it's similar to the United Kingdom, and you might only see one or two independents make it through in different electorates, maybe in Queensland. But with the Senate, you've been seeing one nation, as I wrote in my piece for Alternative Right about Pauline Hanson. Yeah, I mean, gaining a lot more support in the Senate, and it's clear that in the next election, one nation is going to be a real, a huge power broker in Australian politics. So, obviously with the House of Lords, you don't have that in the United Kingdom, correct?
Well, I'm not even sure how the House of Lords works anymore, but the way it used to work was that the House of Lords, they appoint people from each party, and then there are still some independent peers, and they were trying to abolish it or reform it, but I think that all got kind of bogged down, but it's not really too important. The House of Lords, they tend to just follow behind the House of Commons if they know what's good for them.
Rubber stamp, yeah.
So this new coalition, I guess, is that what we'd call it? The large Tory party, even though its power base has been taken down quite a bit, they're still the party with the most votes. But they forged this tactical alliance with the DUP, Ulster.
It's the Democratic Unionist Party.
The Democratic Unionist Party. Which is mostly based out of Northern Ireland.
Yes,
correct. So
they're
a relatively small presence in the Parliament, but now I guess they had enough votes to make it so that they could take part in this ruling coalition. So
Well, just look at the numbers. Okay, now the Conservative Party they won 317 seats. Now, to actually control the House of Commons, you need at least 322. There's a special reason for that, because the Sinn Féin MPs, who are kind of Irish nationalists, they don't sit in the House of Commons. They kind of boycott it, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And so you need 322 MPs to control it. So with 317 from the Conservatives and then 10 from the DUP, that pushes them across the mark. They need to get a majority.
What do you think of the ramifications that this alliance will have for British politics?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. It's an interesting one, because I think there's no real appetite in the Conservative Party to have a leadership election, and there are a number of reasons for that. Now, in the aftermath of the election, a lot of the bookmakers were saying that Boris Johnson was the favourite to become the next leader of the Conservative Party, and there's still a lot of sentiment behind that idea. But I think Boris Johnson has lots of problems, and there's a lot of people who don't really like him, and he's had a lot of scandals in the past. And even though he's quite a charismatic figure, a lot of people would think,
he was pro-Brexit, correct?
Well, yeah, he actually campaigned for Brexit, but a lot of people thought he was doing that simply to put one over David Cameron.
Okay.
And so there is a lot of people. I think a lot of the people in the Conservative Party, a lot of the factions wouldn't really like to have him as the leader, and they feel more comfortable in a way with somebody like Theresa May or somebody else. Now, Theresa May might be forced to kind of fall on her sword in that, but what they don't want is a contested leadership election leading to the party becoming very divided. Because if you had a leadership election, the whole problem with the Conservative Party is it's been a very divided party for since Mrs. Thatcher really, and it's been divided between the kind of pro-EU people and the anti-EU people, and that division is still very much there. And one of the kind of good things for the Conservative Party about Brexit was it was giving them a way out of this insurmountable division in the party. But right now, if they had an election, those scars would reopen. They kind of want Theresa May to sort of hang on, or a kind of seamless switch to a new leader, somebody that they can all agree on, somebody kind of a kind of bland, boring neutrality candidate.
Who was the other woman? I remember when I was there in England last year, there was they were talking about who should take Cameron's place, and there was another woman who said something like, "Well, I've got children and Theresa May doesn't.
Yeah.
So I'm more qualified." And everybody said, "How dare you?" And
she thought she was in the DUP when she said that.
Who was that?
I don't know. She's a forgotten woman now. She's been dropped down the memory hole.
There are all these weird childless leaders of Europe. You've obviously got Merkel, who's notorious, and then you've got Macron, who seems to be in some kind of submissive mistress relationship with his mother, in inverted commas, or his teacher, or whatever the hell she was. And then you've got Theresa May, who's also somebody who
and Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland.
What's the deal with her? Fill us in on Scotland. What the hell's going on in Scotland, Colin? Have you got to go back and foment a kind of Braveheart 2 revolution there?
Well, you see what happened in Scotland, didn't you? I mean, it was in my hometown, which used to be solid Labour in the 70s and 80s. That's the Labour Party is now the third party. Overall, in the Scottish election, the Conservatives are the second party, and Labour is actually nationally the third party in Scotland.
Really?
Yeah. So we've got a nationalist party. They're the biggest. They've got the most votes, the most seats. Then we've got the Conservative Party. They're the second biggest, and just ahead of the Labour Party.
Now, what kind of nationalists are they? They're not your normal kind of nationalists, though, the SNP, right? They're more your left-wing ones. Is this correct?
I'd say they're mainly animated by a hatred of England, and they get a lot of their support from other groups who are not actually Scottish, who also hate the English. I mean, Scotland has a very large residue of kind of Irish descended people, and a lot of those people, they just really hate England, and they're all like the Moore potato famine still, and so that's part of the energy of the SNP. Now they're kind of like the real kind of Scots, which you could probably define by being sort of Calvinist or Church of Scotland or post Church of Scotland, like myself. Those Scots tend to be much more unionist or much more conservative, and we've seen a bit of that at this election, because the Conservatives made a lot of breakthroughs, and they actually managed to take seats from quite high-ranking SNP figures, like Alex Salmond, for example. He lost his seat up in the northeast to the Conservative resurgence.
This in the midst of still losing quite a few seats overall.
I think they gained something like 10 seats in Scotland this time, and I think overall they're down about 13 seats.
And does the situation in Scotland, how does that kind of have ramifications for, broader UK politics? I mean, why was, obviously the SNP was not a possibility to form a coalition with, because they would possibly have formed it with Labour if they could have. Is that correct?
basically the SNP, they had a tremendous victory in 2015, and they basically swept the whole country, and I think they won almost every seat except for 3 or 4.
Yep.
It was sort of coming off the independence referendum, and in the independence referendum, the people voting for independence. It was the inverse of the Brexit vote. You had 48% voted yes to Scotland leaving the UK, and 52% voted to remain in the UK. But the thing was, the SNP, they got all the independence voters, whereas the parties supporting the union split that vote 3 ways, and that enabled the SNP to have a tremendous success in 2015. And so they're always going to come down a bit from that. Now, a lot of people said Nicola Sturgeon lost a bit of support because she was pushing too hard for the Indy 2 referendum. And the mood in the country is like, oh, fuck it, we've done that already. And people are much more focused on this Brexit process now. And so,
how does the SNP relate to Brexit? I mean, what is significant? There was a rumour that Scotland wanted to stay in the EU. Is this correct, or was that Ireland?
Well, if you look at the Brexit vote, more people in Scotland voted to remain than to leave. Now, the SNP thought they could use the energy from the Remain campaign, and they could take that energy and they could push that into an Independence 2 referendum. And a lot of people.
So what's going on with that? What's going on with this new independence referendum? Is there any links to that we don't need to talk about?
Well, it's not happening because people saw that as a bit kind of too politically cynical, and they're fed up with all this uncertainty that it creates. Because we've got enough. Right now, we've reached saturation point with uncertainty thanks to Brexit. So to actually try to load a new independence referendum on top of that.
It's too much. It's too much.
The voters have, they've fucking had it with all these referendums and uncertainty that.
Don't you think the whole? Yeah, go ahead. But don't you think the whole process of democracy is becoming tired? You know what I mean? There's these endless votes, and endless, and it's always a little bit here, but I mean, obviously from an alt-right perspective, I think we're dubious to some extent of democracy per se. At least I am.
Well, and it's a kind of paradox, isn't it? Because you've got it's like water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. I mean, there's all this kind of democracy, but where it really counts, like having a bit of proportional representation, so you can actually vote for a party that you believe in that's going to be represented at some level. That's not even there unless you happen to believe in Theresa May or Nicola Sturgeon or you're lucky enough to live in Northern Ireland.
Yes, exactly. I know. I think it's ridiculous. There's all this democracy, and obviously there's everything that's going on with Trump at the moment. Obviously there's a group of people that are out to impeach the president, and this whole Comey thing, and obviously the Comey thing obviously hurt Trump to some extent, but it was certainly not a knockout punch. And it's just the same group of people that are trying to impeach him and blah blah blah. It's just all so tiresome. It's like, just get on with things. Let's do some things, And in the continuing of the terrorist attacks that we keep seeing.
Well, the left don't believe in democracy. That's obvious. Yeah, the left completely don't believe in democracy. And you see the same thing in Britain. They're talking about, okay, we got a better result than we expected, and that's a kind of endorsement of our views. So therefore, that gives us permission to filibuster and to sabotage things and to cause chaos and to promote demonstrations, riots and strikes. Because the British government is now kind of on a knife edge, they're out to use this result to stir things up and to cause chaos from it.
Yeah, but that can have an adverse effect and push people again to the right. So I think I think I had their chance here. I think with Corbyn but I think and that's another thing I wanted to say. All the left wing people again on my Facebook pages, they were celebrating like they fucking won, and I had to point out on their pages, guys, you did fucking lose again. I mean, the left continues to lose in England, and it lost in France. I mean, Macron is not a left winger.
They lost in Scotland. They lost in Northern Ireland. They didn't win anywhere. And this was their high water mark. And the thing is, their high water mark keeps getting lower and lower.
This is something I think I think we're remiss not to discuss the terrorist attacks in Manchester and in London.
About that, yeah.
What effect do you think that had on, if any,
Yeah.
on this election?
Yeah, when I saw that news, I thought, okay, this is going to really play into Theresa May's hands. That's what I thought.
Right.
Because at that time the polls were narrowing, but she still had like a 5-point lead at that time. And then I thought, okay, this is gonna fit in with all these narratives about how Jeremy Corbyn is pally with these kind of Islamic types and these Islamic groups that are connected to Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS or whatever. And I thought, the tabloid press are going to like flog this to death, and the British voters are going to be gaslit, and they're going to go along with it, and they're going to think, Corbyn's too dangerous, and we better go for the strong and stable woman in a hat. And that didn't happen, surprisingly.
No,
and that's why my predictions completely failed here.
I think Corbyn used the Manchester thing and maybe also the London thing to say something like the police force is understaffed. I remember reading that somewhere, that like this just shows we need a better workforce.
Socialist angle on fighting terrorism, or police,
yeah.
So I thought that was interesting, and I thought that. Obviously Theresa May is tougher on immigration, but she's not that tougher. You know what I mean? Like it's only.
Even that's debatable, to be honest.
That's what I mean.
In terms of actual immigration, I'd say that Jeremy Corbyn would be tougher, but he would be a lot more lax in his refugee policy. So
I saw Jeremy Corbyn talking about immigration, and he said, listen, he would keep it. He said he was not going to increase it under any circumstance. He would keep it probably at the levels it's at now, possibly reduce it, and he wasn't ready to.
Yeah, that's probably true. But then he just like anybody who said I'm a refugee into the country, so it wouldn't do any good. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, well, there you go. As I said, the left has to properly explicate its views on immigration and refugees, particularly in this time of era.
Look after them. Look after them over there. It's cheaper.
Hey, mate, you're preaching to the choir here, mate. I wouldn't allow a single person from the Middle East to step onto fucking.
But they won't. The left won't go along with that because they know that British people and most people in the West, if left to their own devices, are going to swing towards conservatism, right of centrism. And so they need to import the voters, and so they're going to keep banging on about how we have to bring them all over here, and how we have to enrich our society, and how we don't have enough kebab recipes, and so on.
Yeah, well, I think that situation is. Clearly, it's. I personally don't even think that these jihadi attacks that we're seeing in the West. I don't even think they've really begun yet. I think when they really begin, which I think is going to happen in the next 5 years, it's going to be like a civil war in our country. So
it was kind of noticeable, though, wasn't it? It was kind of noticeable. We had an article on the site by Daniel Barge, which a conspiratorial article, which looked at terrorist attacks in the UK. And since the year 2000, there's only been 4 terrorist attacks where more than one person has died. And 3 of them came after the announcement of the Article 50 process.
What is the Article 50 process? Is that related to Brexit?
Yeah, that's the passage in the treaty that describes how a country can leave the EU. And so when you invoke Article 50, it means you start this 2-year period of negotiations, after which you are then no longer a member of the gilded club of the EU.
Well, to quote Chairman Mao, there is great chaos under heaven. The situation is excellent. So once again, there is great chaos everywhere, but then that can be an opportunity for many radical forms of politics, like our own, possibly on the outright. So obviously, the Chairman Mao possibly wouldn't have supported, of course, but I just sort of throw that quote in there.
It is very remarkable that there are 3 major terrorist attacks immediately after the Brexit process is announced. And before that, people give Sadiq Khan a lot of stick because he had this this phrase about terrorism is part and parcel of life in a big multicultural city, blah blah blah. Actually, he just said big city, and people think he was talking about London. And actually, he said that he actually made that statement in 2016 in reference to New York, where there was some bomb attacks on the anniversary of 9/11. And at that time, London was doing quite well in terms of terrorism. the police were keeping on top of things. Very few people were being killed or maimed in terrorist attacks.
We had a terrorist attack here in Australia. You probably didn't get it on your news. We had one in Brighton, someone from ISIS, which Brighton is basically a very classy suburb, almost like Beverly Hills, or I don't know, I don't know the classy suburbs of London, but Piccadilly, but like so yeah, it was like there was a terrorist attack in a very classy part of town from ISIS. And
how many did they get?
Not many, only a couple, 2 or 3. So that's probably why it didn't make the news. It was just, and also there was the local state premier of Victoria has begun to put ballards. So obviously Muslims are using cars and vehicles. So around major areas where there are like pedestrians and things, he's putting these things. So basically cars can't mount the sidewalk and run people over. So that's a kind of new thing that's just happened.
Yeah, a bit like London Bridge. All the bridges in London will be getting bollards and concrete blocks. It's going to really beautify the metropolis.
Times Square, except that was supposedly not by a terrorist.
Yeah. No, there was an attack in Melbourne in Burke Street. That was definitely by a terrorist. He ran over about 20 people and they killed 2 or 3 in Melbourne in Burke Street. But he converted to Islam about 2 weeks before. He tried to kill his homosexual brother and then he burnt the Bible. He did a whole bunch of Islamic stuff. But the media literally hid all that from public view. And
but now they can blame that on the DUP.
Exactly, it's all the DUP's fault.
DUP inspired terrorist attack on gay people.
I'm going to go, boys, because I'm going to go up bush. So you can carry on without me, though. Feel free to carry on without me, but I'll step out. It's a pleasure talking to you, Colin, and a pleasure talking to you, Andy. And I hope things turn out well for the UK, and it'll be interesting to see what comes next. But I'm going to head off, all right?
Okay, have a good one, Richard.
See you guys.
All right,
bye,
Richard.
Bye.
Well, Colin, with Richard's exit, is there anything else we can say to just sort of sum up the situation? What do you think? Where is this going?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that it might be a good thing that Theresa May is being kind of whittled down to size. If she had got this thumping great majority, there's a lot of speculation about what she would have done. She would have. She's obviously very inclined to clamp down on freedom. She's very in favour.
Oh yeah, she was the one who was saying we got to regulate the internet now after Manchester.
Exactly. Yeah. She was like really gung ho for like clamping down on all forms of free speech that might be somewhat problematic in a very dysfunctional multicultural society. And so now that she's had her wings clipped, and whoever comes in, if she stays or whoever comes in, they're going to have their hands tied. In that respect, it's going to be a lot harder for the Conservatives to kind of push a strong agenda of internet censorship. So I think that's a good point. That's a point that Sean Gabb was making in his one of his recent articles. Of course, the big concern is, will this derail Brexit? That's the main concern. It could actually help Brexit in some ways, because the Conservative Party will now have to focus on Brexit, because that's the key issue. And if they mess up on that, then that's going to cause sort of deep divisions, which could destroy the party. So they have to kind of get their Brexit game together now.
And they have to be loyal. Maybe they'll be forced to be loyal to their base in a way that they wouldn't have had to be if they won some big victory. Like now.
Yeah, they might take a few notes out of the DUP's playbook, hopefully.
Yes, that's right. Why did they know? What's the inside story about why that was? I mean, no, it was just a tactical decision, but why reach out to that particular tiny political party to form a coalition with? What was behind that?
Well, they're basically a bit stumped for choices. I think. I mean, the post-Cameron, the Conservative Party became a lot more kind of like, culturally Marxist in that they kind of promote diversity and homosexuality much more. That's the reason Theresa May is a leader, because, let's have a woman leader. You know what I mean? Unlike Mrs. Thatcher, let's have a woman leader who's not based on her merits. In the case of Mrs. Thatcher, she became a female leader before it was fashionable. Okay, now in the case of Theresa May, she became female leader after it became fashionable. So therefore, she's not doing it on her own merits. And so
Yes.
now it's a little bit of an awkward arrangement with the DUP, because they are a bit of a they're perceived as a bit homophobic, quotation marks. But they have to do that because there's nobody else. I mean, the other options that they could have made an arrangement with the only other options would be the SNP, which there's a lot of problems there. I could never see the SNP getting into bed with Theresa May, even though Nicola Sturgeon is probably a crypto lesbian. And the other party would be the Liberal Democrats. And the Liberal Democrats, I think they won a few seats. I think they've got about something like 12 seats, similar size to the DUP. Now, the Lib Dems did actually have a coalition government with David Cameron from 2010 to 2015. The British government was a Conservative Lib Dem coalition. But the problem with that is the Lib Dems really got the bad end of the bargain, because they lost a lot of support through being part of that coalition. And so the Lib Dems are very, very reluctant to repeat that experience.
Mm-hmm. So it was just sort of their only avenue of possibility was to go to this party that I'd never heard of. And again, frankly, speaking from somebody who's definitely an outsider to the whole. I mean, I know certain things that I see and hear about in the media, but I'd never heard of this party before, and the fact that they exist, that people like this exist. I mean, I kind of jokingly on my Facebook page asked if they were sort of like the Westboro Baptist Church of the UK.
Well, that's how the media are trying to present them. Yeah, some of the media, the leftist media.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're just obsessed with homosexuality, and with ridding culture of homosexuality and just religious fanatics and all this kind of thing. And I mean, I know they're probably not being portrayed correctly, and I meant that facetiously, but it kind of does raise a question in my mind. Like I just didn't think. I thought that anybody who said these kinds of things in England today would just, would get arrested. I mean, with the state of free speech right now, the state of political correctness in England, in the UK, and in Europe generally, I just didn't think that sort of thing flew.
Well, so you're allowed to have opinions, but it's like, anything you say could be construed as being hate speech now. That's homophobic. Or
yes.
That's insulting to Muslims, and then you might be forced to apologize. And probably if you dig through the kind of news record, you'll find cases where DUP people have actually had to kind of like climb down and walk back their words a bit.
Right. So it's just like, but I mean, it was in a way like refreshing, and it was sort of like, wow, there really are. Real men actually do exist in the UK. No offense, these days. I mean, just this. It was like something so bracing about reading these. I'm not necessarily endorsing all of the opinions that I saw, but just
hopefully one day the initials UK will stand for uncocked.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see where it goes, but. So is Northern Ireland like a more quote-unquote based area, generally speaking, than other portions of the Commonwealth, or what would be your assessment there?
Yeah, well, it's a divided society, and so there's a kind of there's a bit of an ethnic or cultural fracture line, and because that's always been there. That makes people more defensive of their identity, and so they're more aware of who they are.
Exactly.
And
that makes sense.
That's been going on. That's been going on for a long time. Certainly since the late '60s with the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and so that's been a kind of experience, a kind of formative experience for a lot of the people there. And so that they've had a bit of a head start when it comes to identitarian communal politics, which is, what lots of other people will actually have to work on in the future.
And yet it seems like the IRA and their Sinn Féin and I guess other, sort of quasi-IRA bodies, like for the ones that were representing the Catholic end of the population, they seem to have gone in this direction of cultural Marxism, like wanting to bring in more immigrants and being just more liberal on social issues.
Are you referring Are you referring to the Republic of Ireland and their new was it Prime Minister, who's a gay person of Indian descent?
Yeah, that's pretty weird.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you fight for 500 years to get rid of the English, and then you just let the Third World flood in. Well done, Ireland.
So that's kind of weird that there's this reaction in among the Protestants of Northern Ireland that seems to be much more old school, whereas the other side of the other side of the conflict is going more in this kind of what we would definitely see as a less desirable direction. It's kind of interesting that the Ulster Protestants are the ones digging in, at least in this in the example of this one party.
Yeah,
they're the ones digging in and having these kind of old school views.
Some of the nationalist, quotation marks, some of the nationalist movements in the Celtic fringe, they tend to take a kind of anti-colonial approach. So they kind of mimic.
That's true. Yeah.
Some of the anti-colonial movements in the Third World,
right.
And so they kind of identify. A lot of the Irish nationalists, they identify with people like Yasser Arafat and the PLO and
right.
Maybe ISIS, I don't know.
And Mandela and others.
Yeah, and the SNP are a bit like that. Even though they have other elements as well which are not quite so cocking like that. But that's definitely a thing. And then the Ulster Protestants, they kind of go the other way because that's what they're doing. We're going to go the other way. So a lot of the Ulster Protestants, they have a strong affinity with Israel because the Sinn Féin and the IRA are seen as being pro-Palestinian. And this is very evident in Scotland because Scotland is very much tied into the kind of loyalist and IRA kind of politics of Northern Ireland as well, because we have considerable connections with Northern Ireland and with Ireland. And you see this in the football culture, even with the fans of Glasgow Celtic. They wave Palestinian flags at their football matches. And Glasgow Celtic, that's the Catholic team in the east end of Glasgow, and then the Protestant team, Glasgow Rangers, they have would you believe it, Israeli flags.
So it's almost just proxies, right? I mean, it's like they're taking this side, so we'll take that side. I mean, it's maybe it's more complicated than that.
Well, actually,
but it's
speaking about football and politics, an interesting thing about the terrorist attack, the last one, the London Bridge terrorist attack, there was one guy who put up a lot of resistance.
Right.
His name was Roy Larner, and he was when he saw the terrorists laying into people with these fucking huge knives strapped to their hands, he took them on. He shouted, "Fuck off! I'm Millwall." And Millwall is this football team in London, which is southeast London, which is very much associated with this kind of bit of a skinhead, roughneck kind of hooligan image, and they're often accused of being racist. And then one of the terrorists who was shot dead, he was lying there in his Arsenal football strip. So football and politics tend to get a bit mixed up in the case of the UK.
That's pretty wild. I mean, here in the United States, we've got our sports fans, but I've never heard of it being that kind of tribalism. Where it's like,
well, Arsenal are.
Off,
Arsenal tend to be. Arsenal tend to be a bit more of a kind of multiculturalist kind of team. They're a bit like trendy, multicultural people support Arsenal, and also a lot of ethnic minorities support Arsenal, so they've got that kind of image. And then other teams in London, you got Tottenham Hotspur. They're very popular amongst the Jewish people in London. Chelsea, they used to be a bit of a kind of skinhead, National Front type of football team, but they've tried to move away from that image, obviously, because they're one of these teams with a lot of money and a lot of financial assets now.
So is that why Elvis Costello didn't want to go to Chelsea?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it's probably a football reference.
That was just an obscure song reference from 1979.
Oh no, 1979. That would be exactly the image that Chelsea Football Club would have, and Chelsea Football Club, they're part of a kind of blue alliance with Glasgow Rangers. So there's a whole kind of weird sort of pseudo-political football and subculture in the United Kingdom.
Well, it's fascinating to hear about, though. I mean, just from an outsider's perspective, to know that. I think it's much more entrenched there than it is here. I mean, as crazy as people are about sports teams here, I don't think there's that same kind of,
Well, it's hard it's hard to be too enthusiastic about American sports teams because basically they're all people who don't look like you.
well, if you're talking about the NBA, yes, that's true, and the NFL, substantially speaking, yes.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, but still, and I think they're just more corporate, also, in a more general sense than. And in England, it sounds like there's some real organic kind of symbiosis between communities and teams.
Well, we have a different kind of physical culture in America. You have a lot of guns, so you're not really so much into street violence because I mean, recreational violence, let's call it. I mean, people involved in violence in America, that would tend to get a bit messy very quickly because there's too many firearms around. In Britain, working class culture, there's always been this kind of culture of street violence and recreational violence, a way of, for the working class to release their stress and, after a...
Blow off steam.
Yeah, blow off steam. That's always been there, and it's still there. I mean, it's sort of gradually been.
Yeah, it's getting. They're making it more. They're trying to make it more corporatized. They're trying to Americanize.
Well, they're trying to feminize. They're trying to feminize and sort of tone everything down and make take the joy out of life in general.
Make everything safer and more just.
Sanitized, feminized, and
sanitizing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, maybe this is a good note to leave on. I mean, it's we sort of got off on a tangent there, but it is still relevant to British politics in a broader sense, and it's interesting to hear about.
Well, this is how we blow off steam by doing the occasional podcast.
Yes, I feel so much better now. I was so full of tension before we started. Now, it feels good. Well. So we'll see what happens with this new coalition between the Conservative Party and the National Ulster?
The Democratic Unionist Party.
The Democratic Union. I wasn't even close. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This is Andy Nowicki along with Colin Liddell and Richard Wolstencroft signing off. We'll talk to you all soon.